and thank you for listening to the Auto Riff. Today we have Michael Feenan on from the Drunken UX Podcast. Michael, how are you doing?
Hello, sir. I am doing quite well. I'm enjoying the fact that our weather is starting to cool off just a hair, and I'm looking at my convertible and I'm thinking top-down weather is upon us.
Yes. Ours warmed up for about 2 days, and then we're supposed to drop back down. Up here in the great country of Canada, we're getting into our very, very cold winter.
Yeah, see, that's I'm not a cold weather guy, even though like Kansas will get cold. Don't let it fool you. But we get the full experience. You come to Kansas, expect 0 degrees, Fahrenheit for us, and 110 in the summer. You get the full gamut.
When I was in Florida, our winters were what I would say are our summers here. So I always said Florida seasons are hot and then a little less hot.
The nice part is though, we stay dry enough that like this is great car country.
Yeah,
because you don't have all the salt attacking things.
right.
You don't have a lot of rain.
Rust, yeah. Whereas here, if you could find an older car that doesn't have a ton of rust, you've hit the jackpot.
Yeah, well, I can imagine, especially because you guys have a lot more snow, a lot more salt on the roads, a lot more to deal with.
They will probably start salting our roads within the next month or so, because they do it kind of ahead of time, so that first snow when it falls melts kind of immediately, and then it's just constant salt after that.
Oh, God.
So how are the cars doing? Tell us what cars you have. This is our second record for anyone who doesn't know, so I already know the cars. But,
hey, accidents happen. That's the way life
exactly.
goes.
So you have a Triumph TR6.
Yes, I've got a 72 TR6. I've got as you know, I have a 53 Chevy 3100 pickup, and I had a 53 Chevy Bel Air, which was sort of the sister to the brother pickup. And shortly before we got together for this show, I sent the Bel Air off to a new old home, as it were. And so sadly, beautiful car, and I enjoyed it. But as is sometimes the case, we are but stewards for something like this until it needs to go back home, so to speak.
Absolutely. So tell us who got you into cars.
Yeah. I started, man, since I was very young. I remember our very first house when I was a kid. I was 7, 8 maybe, and my dad coming home with, and I can't remember now if it was the Triumph. The Triumph I have is the Triumph my dad bought when I was a child. And that may have been the first one, or it may have been a 56 Buick Special, 4-door, white on green, beautiful old V8 iron with the giant chrome grille, the little speed holes along the fender, like the whole nine. And I always say, like, that was my first car, even though I was little tiny Michael. He would take me out on gravel roads again in Kansas. It's like we got plenty of like space where no people are. And I would get to drive that car up and down, an automatic. I would get to drive that up and down the road, and I helped him, sand it and paint it and go through all that. So that was always kind of my first car, and we went from that to a '48 Dodge, the old gangster, suicide doors. You can get 6 people up front and 3 bodies in the back if you know how to chop them up right.
That's not the first time I've heard that, actually.
And I love that car. It ended up a fella bought it, and I remember seeing it for sale at one point, and he had got beautiful white wall tires on it and had gone through the motor completely, and it was a beautiful car. I do miss that one quite a bit.
Now, having said that, are there any old cars you wish you had? Or is there anything you're currently looking for? Or do you kind of happen across project cars, or is there are you looking for something specific?
Yeah, the Triumph kind of came to me when I was in high school. It became my car, and so I've always had it. I did move across the country at one point, and I left it with my dad. At which point it kind of stayed in storage and slowly kind of started wasting away. And here a few years back, I decided, no, it's time. Like that needs to be on the road again, and I started a big project with it. My pickup, I saw it for months, I went to this little hamburger joint for lunch on Fridays, and I would drive down this road, and on the road, this truck would be parked in a gentleman's driveway. Nothing in it, no for sale sign, nothing like that. And one day I just said, you know what? I want to know. And so I pulled in, I knocked on this stranger's front door, and I just said, hey, do you want to sell that? Or are you interested in getting rid of that? I've seen it out here. And lo and behold, he's like, I've been thinking about it, and maybe it's time. And I was like, that's what I wanted to hear. And 3 hours and $3,000 later, I had a beautiful Chevy 3100. Right now, I would say I'm always interested in if I could ever come across like an old Model A or Model T pickup.
Okay.
That would be sort of the next thing that I would have to have. I've never had one. They are wild if you're not familiar with those old Model A's and Model T's. Like, they have all the same like pedals and levers in places where you expect to see pedals and levers, but they don't do any of the same stuff. So that's something like I would love to have something like that really goes back to that era. I've never had anything older than, well, my 53. That's been my oldest vehicle.
Nice. So tell us about your TR6 project car, because you already told me about it. So your dad painted it John Deere green, is that right?
Yeah, when he got it, it was, of course, not in great shape. It was a pretty well beat up car. This would have been the very late 1980s, maybe early 1990s. So it was at that point maybe 20 years old, give or take 18 years old. And yeah, he went out and found literal John Deere tractor paint, tractor green, and sprayed it with that old enamel paint. And that paint job lasted on it until I started the rebuild of it here 3-4 years ago. Now, was it in great shape by that point? No, it had weathered, but it did. I mean, it held up really well. And for those first, easy 20 years that we had it, man, a good wash and a coat of wax, and you really would be surprised by like how well it went. It was not the right color, not by a long shot, but it still looked good. I'd come back, I'd moved back quite some time back, but it had stayed in storage. My dad didn't have time for it. I didn't have time or space for it. And we were sitting around one day and just kind of said, we need to do something. It needs to go somewhere that it'll be taken care of with somebody who will fix it up. Let's get our $800. Let's get our $1,000 we can get out of this and just be out from under it. And of all people, my mom stepped in. I never would have expected this. And she's like, you can't get rid of that car. We have too many memories in it. And I'm like, do you understand? Like, I don't have the money to even get started on this. And she's like, we'll pay half of it. And my dad looked at her across the room and was like, we will? But I said, deal. No backsies.
Right.
So that got started. She kicked in the first few thousand on it. I matched a few thousand, and we were off to the races. And I have it today in my garage right now. With it's got the body on it right now is better than when it rolled off the assembly line. It is magnificent. It's not British racing green, but it is the right Jaguar green, which is a very, very close, very dark green, rich color. The motor's been gone through. I'm a big fan of original. My pickup's original. My Bel Air, down to the AM radio in the Bel Air, it worked. And I will do like little modifications. We have put electronic ignition in the TR6. We have put, we took out the lever shocks in the rear end and put in like real tube shocks in it. And the big thing was these TR6s, the 70s were a bad time for automotive performance in the U.S. And these little tiny, a TR6 is barely bigger than like a Spitfire or a Midget. These things shipped with 150 horsepower petrol-injected engines in the UK. Those didn't meet emission standards in the U.S. So when they shipped them over here, they pulled all of that beautiful hardware out, slapped some cheap piece of crap Zenith Stromberg carburetors on them, and dropped it to like 104, 106 horsepower. And it really crippled them. And so one of the things I did was I pulled that off, I didn't put injection back in them. It's kind of hard to retrofit that. And there is like the Weber. Weber makes a beautiful triple carb setup that is a nightmare to hook up and very expensive. I lucked my way into a set of SU HS6 carburetors for it, which would have been right, again, like on the Jaguars of the time, on like the older MGs and Spitfires. And you also get about 20, 25 horsepower out of them because they're just a better tuned carburetor. So I've swapped those into it as well. And I think it's a nice balance between the cost of really overhauling that fuel system and getting it, some power that you can really feel. And in that car, that is a nice feeling push under those rear wheels.
So last time we talked, you were looking to bleed the brakes. Have you done that?
No, I have not. I admit that. The brakes still need bled, and I still have a stuck needle in my carburetor that will be getting pulled and cleaned. I did, however, get the last batch of parts ordered. Right. So I got 2 of them 2 or 3 days ago, and the last one is on a truck somewhere between here and Dallas. That's the tonneau cover. I think I'm saying that right. Not the convertible top and not the boot that covers the convertible top, but they made a secondary cover if you had the top down that would cover the seats and steering wheel and seal that off. And so I got one of those brand new. There are only 2, I think, part suppliers left in the U.S., and so you're kind of stuck with them. And Moss is one of them, and they're good. Like Moss Motors is a fantastic company, but they were having a sale, and I had been waiting. They do 2 or 3 times a year. They do this sale where the more you order, the more you save. Right. And I knew that cover was like an $800 cover, so I held out and I got in there and got like the 15% off or whatever it was. So it was a wait well spent. But I also was not ready for it until now. So like these are the last parts going in, and then I have nothing left to do but enjoy it and drive it a lot.
Now, you plan on making that your pretty much daily driver?
I don't know. Well, yeah, maybe. We'll see, what my insurance allows me to do. Luckily, I work from home, so my daily driving usually is limited to going and getting lunch. So I'm not putting, 50, 60 miles on a vehicle every day. I do have just a normal pickup that I drive, but it's not fun. It doesn't get eyeballs and waves, as you drive by. And the Triumph, it really, it was throughout my entire high school, it was my daily driver. Through a good chunk of college, it was my daily driver. And so to have it back on the road in a state where it's like, no, I'm just going to jump in that and go have fun and go to the grocery store, go, get a burger. Absolutely. I'm going to enjoy the heck out of it. I'm huge on antiques, not just cars. Like I collect fountain pens, I collect depression glass. I love old furniture. Like old things excite me and get me really interested in history. And those things don't do me any good if they're not used. Right. If it's sitting hidden in my garage, what was the point in putting the money into the car? Right. So it's not a trailer queen. It's definitely not a perfect restoration, though I would argue it is very good. And I want to show it off. So yeah, I will drive it, and I will love that car. And it's probably the one, the Bel Air was a purchase of opportunity. My dad and myself traded some cars with a couple fellows in the next town over, and it just happened that the guy that bought his old 49 F1 was moving and had this 53 Bel Air. So I was like, you know what? Why don't you sell that to me? And the story of earlier was his son reached out to me on Instagram and asked, hey, could I buy that back for my dad? And it's like, how can you say no to a story like that? Those kind of vehicles, even my pickup, it's like the day may come where I will let that pickup go. But the Triumph is a car that I'm like, my mom was 100% right. That is the car, that is the family car. That is something my dad put his work into, I put my work into, and where it goes from here is going to be part of my story.
Did your dad ever tell you what attracted him to that car?
That's an excellent question that I don't think I know the answer to. I do seem to recall that it was just sort of I think and I apologize to my father if I'm wrong on this. I want to say that it was sort of a barter situation. He was a contractor in construction, stuff like that, and I think it was a situation of, hey, I don't have money to pay you right now, but would you be interested in this? And he said yes. Now, I hope my memory is right on that, and I'm not totally making that up, but I would also accept that I'm totally making that up. And like I say, I was so small. I was so young, 7, 8 years old when he got that. So it's like my memory of those times is filled with inaccuracies and starry-eyed stuff. So, but I do think that was the way that went down originally.
Were there any other cars he had that you wish he had kept for you to get later on too?
Offhand, no, not really. Like the Buick was cool, but there was nothing special about it. It was just something we got and we worked on, and it was nice, and then we didn't have it anymore.
Right.
We had an old I want to say it was a 72 or 74 Monte Carlo. We fixed that up and sold it to my cousin, and then my cousin had it through, I think, medical school. Then he sold that. Actually, if there's one car that, let's call it a family adjacent car, my uncle had a 70 Nova, the fastback 70 Nova SS with, man, the Hurst shifter in it. And I remember he had it for a while and was in the process of moving and didn't have anywhere to put it. So we held on to it for a couple months, I think it was.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, he's like, drive it, keep it, loose and oiled up and gassed up and all that. And I'm like, I know what I'm driving to school tomorrow. Thanks. And that car was a monster. And like it wasn't like crazy souped up or anything, but it had some gut to it. And it sounded cool. It had a real kick to it. Like that thing was a fun car. That would be fun to still have. It was pretty, and it was fun. A muscle car, yes, if there's anything I'm looking for. I would love to get my hands on like some real Detroit iron, and I'm not sure what.
Right.
I don't know that I'd be real picky about it, but there's definitely something in me that really would love to go that direction at some point.
I fell in love with the 1970 Chevelle at a very young age.
Yeah.
I remember, you remember Speed Vision back in the day?
Yeah.
So they used to do old muscle car tests, and I had to have been 8 or so when they were doing this. It was like early Saturday morning type thing, and a Chevelle came on TV, and they were doing this old, like it was like an actual test from back when it was brand new, and they were driving around this track, and I just remember looking at that going, I have to have that. And
I do think. Oh, go ahead.
No. I was going to say the only other car that I really want a collection of is the Trans Am or the Firebird because of Knight Rider first. Knight Rider's actually canceled right before I was born, but I watched all the spin-off stuff, and my parents said that's the only show I would stop and watch as a baby. And then Smokey and the Bandit, of course. So between those, I want a Chevelle and I want a Trans Am.
I almost, man, it was real close, and I can't remember now why I didn't pull the trigger on it, but I did almost land a 71, I think it was a 71, Gran Torino.
Oh, nice.
And now that I'm sitting here thinking, because I haven't thought about that in a couple years now, and if you ask me why I didn't buy it, I honestly don't remember. And I think it may have simply been a matter of I didn't feel the price was right on it. I think the guy was a little high. And I think that's what my memory is telling me, because I remember that was a beautiful, and it had been painted like purple or something, which I definitely didn't love, but it had the hood scoop. It had, the Clint Eastwood movie. I think that one was like a 72, and in 72 they had changed them, and I didn't like those changes. This was right before they did all of that, and it had the cool front lights that folded in and all of that, and that's like. That would have been a nice one, and I would go that direction. If one came up and the price was right, I'd probably snatch that up real fast.
So let's talk about your 53 Twins.
Yeah.
Well, the one you have, you got rid of the one twin, but you kept the other.
Kept the other one. I do love my pickup. I've done a lot of work to that, and with all of these cars that have come in and out of our lives in different ways, like I'm not a mechanics guy. Like, I can't quote to you compression ratios and valve timing and all of that. You give me electrical, you give me body work, and like I'll rebuild a carburetor or all, there are things like that I'm comfortable with, but the math side of it I've never been great on. The pickup I love because I bought that and drove it home. It didn't look great though. The body was in some pretty rough shape, and that's something I love and like is easy to me, like going in there and just like sanding stuff down and straightening metal and getting it looking pristine. I went through, we redid the whole body on that. It's shot with the 2-stage enamel. It's got the board sides down the bed, new carpet and everything inside, new done seat. And the thing that makes my pickup is the visor. I've got one of those old original visors on it, and it's like, man, it gives it such a look that is just right. And I hunted for the Bel Air for the longest time. I wanted to put a visor on it, and they're so hard to find, those original steel visors. But I liked it because I had the truck first. I got the Bel Air second, and as a result, like it's not like, I mean, it is kind of like today if you know enough about engines and base models and the way cars work. But back then, it's like all the parts were basically the same between these. The only thing that was a little different was the drive shaft, the transmission, and the cylinder head. But it's like I had all of these parts, and it's like, man, if something breaks, I'm good. I've got spare parts galore. They both had the exact same engine block in them. They both had that classic 235. The pickup at one point had its motor replaced, but interestingly enough, they replaced it with a 1953 correct engine block. But instead of the original 215 that would have been in it, it was the 235, and then they put, I think, a 261 head on it. I'm trying to remember. I did this math at one point. I need to go back and recheck my numbers now. But they basically kind of Frankensteined it together, but these parts were all pretty interchangeable at the time. The Bel Air came with that 235 and was the old Blue Flame motor. I believe, if I remember right, the engine in the Bel Air was original, but the transmission wasn't. It was one of the Autoglide cars. Those Autoglides had that old 2-speed automatic in them. And all the badging on the Bel Air and everything still said Autoglide. But it had been converted. Somebody dropped that and put in a manual 3 on the tree. But I was like, great, the truck's a 3 on the tree. It's like, I've got the same exact setup between the two. The fun part about the truck is also, like, today, you get in the truck, you've got your little NFC key or whatever. You just sit down and hit your button to start your vehicle now. And the 53 pickup is a push-button start. Like, it's in the floor, but it's still you just turn your key on and you push the button to start the vehicle. The Bel Air is key turn, but those two, though, when I had a chance to kind of put that together, it made for like great conversation at car shows. You get two 53s side by side. The Bel Air has that great big chrome grille. Mine was not in perfect shape. It had that patina to it. It had that wear that comes with those, and I love that. Like I'm big on not. I didn't want to strip it. I didn't want to re-chrome it. I didn't want to ruin that history that kind of went through, through those stories. So the look on, like, I love, a lot of people are all in on that Tri-5. They want that 55, 56, 57 Bel Air. And I'm like, nah, I'm really all right with the first gen, and the big round curves. And mine was a 4-door, and a lot of people hate 4-doors. I'm like, that's just easier to get more people in and out. Go have fun at a parade and fill it with people and all this. So yeah, I really enjoyed that Bel Air. It was a good-looking car, good-looking going down the road, and I don't know why, but I always got a kick out of that damn radio, that AM radio that you could turn on, and you got that warm-up that those tubes have to go through, and then it's like, boom, you've got sound coming out of it. And it's like, man, find that intact in any car these days.
Oh, for sure, yeah. So what's it like? I've never driven a 3 on the tree. I've seen someone drive one. So what is the process like comparatively to, say, like a normal 5-speed?
It's it's not bad. You do have to know where you're at, because they usually didn't have any kind of indicator of like which position is which. So you just have to know This is all the way towards you and up is reverse, down first, up and back is second, all the way down is third. And as long as you know that, you're good to go. Don't never let somebody get in it who's just like, hey, can I take it around the block? And ask them.
No.
It's not that different, but it's different enough. The other thing, like, of course, the Triumph is a 4-speed, not overdrive. And so it's a normal, down on the tunnel shift. And there's something about that kind of shifting that lends itself to the sporty feel, let's say. Like, that notion of, like, jamming that clutch down and shoving that thing into gear. There's something very visceral about that you can't do with a 3 on the tree.
Right.
It's a lot looser feeling. You've got a lot more linkage there to get that lever all the way from your steering wheel down the steering column, around your firewall, down to the transmission. There's a lot of linkage there. So there's a lot more kind of slop feel to it. So there isn't that ability to, like, really hot rod a car like that real well. If you're going, you need to be tootling and just do your Sunday driving in it. Whereas that direct shift, right on the tunnel is a very different feel. But it is at least familiar in a way, like we were talking earlier, the Model A, Model T, whole different ball game getting into that. Like, that is not even remotely the same.
Like, they have the throttle like where the turn signal would be, right?
The throttle is your lever up high. Your shifter is actually only controlling forward and reverse. Your floor pedal, where you would think your clutch is your gear shift between first and second. Like, there's all the different, all the stuff is there, but it's all moved around, like, very, very differently positioned and organized. So same deal. Don't let anybody drive
right.
one of those without a lesson first.
You have to completely retrain yourself when you go to drive that. Like, oh, okay, now here.
And manual timing. Don't forget there's manual timing on those. Yes. So you literally have to set your timing on the column to get it running right.
It makes you wonder, like, now that we have the system we have, right, that, like, who thought these other systems were good ideas?
I mean, it all goes back to, like, tractor days, right? Like, that's kind
true.
of
yeah.
that classic, where all of this sort of starts to stem from, and all the iterations they went through, and how everything old is new again. They were making electric cars in 1904. That was a thing that was available. Big lead acid batteries, but
the Morrison Electric Automobile Company, I believe it was. I did a podcast on them. They were in the early 1900s or late 1800s.
Yeah, and gas, not liquid gas, but during especially like World War II. World War One. The move towards gasifier engines was real big, and so you'd see these taxis driving around with giant, like, Hindenburg-looking balloons on top of them because they had filled them with gas, like smoke gas or wood gas, and that's how they were running their vehicles. And it's like, now here we are coming back to this idea of, well, can we use hydrogen? Can we use some kind of fluorocarbon that's not liquid based? And I don't know that we're going to be anywhere close to that ever happening at this stage with electric going the way it is, but everything has the lendings to what came before, and as always, you refine and you fix stuff. There's I'll throw back here. I'm a web developer, and we have a lot.
Well, okay, you're back.
Did I lose you? I think.
Yeah, you froze.
My connection hiccuped there. We've got this stuff in web development that helps us decide what's the right way to do something. One of those laws is called Jacob's Law, and Jacob's Law is a very simple principle that don't try to do anything super different from how everybody else does it, because people are more likely to be familiar with everyone else's stuff and not yours.
Right.
So if you're the weird oddball out, it's more likely to feel weird and foreign and inaccessible to them. And so that's where I think we start, as we start figuring out, a better way to shift is to move the shifter down. A safer way to make, to get people in cars is to have a seat belt, a 3-point seat belt harness. And so, like, those things start to become standard because everybody's familiar with it. If they're getting in and out of a car, they don't have to wonder, how does the seatbelt in this one work? And remember when electronic seatbelts first came out, like the seatbelts that automatically, tried to attack you and close you. Like,
Yeah.
it was very different. It was it was a jarring experience for a lot of people who weren't used to like getting in a car and immediately seeing something coming at them.
Right.
So like that kind of approach is, I think, how we've, really landed where we are with so much of car functionality.
So what is your take on electric cars? Are you looking forward to them? Do you want nothing to do with them? I personally welcome them. I think they're going to be super fast. They're already super fast.
Yeah.
I mean, I will miss the sound of a V8, whatever, but
I have many opinions, and you don't have enough show for all of them. I think the long and short of it is, I think it's great. I want to see more of them. Yes, electric cars are also bad for a number of reasons, but they do start to unify our energy dependence in a way that we don't necessarily have to rely on two sources of power. We take the need for refined petroleum and electricity, and now say, well, now you just need electricity, and we can shift that burden upstream for for other types of liquid gas. I think the big problem is range. Range is always going to be an issue because it takes me 5 minutes to fill my truck up at a gas station. If I'm traveling across the state or something, I don't have time to stop for half an hour and do a quick charge for an hour. Right. They used to have, back in the early days of some of these electric cars, they actually could hot swap your batteries for you. They would flip open the top of the car and literally pull what would be the engine block, but in this case was a giant battery block, out and drop a new one in, and boom, send you on your way. And I think we need something like that almost at this point, because that time savings is going to be, I think, really important. The thing that worries me, and this worries me about electric vehicles, but it worries me about new vehicles, because I'm in the market right now. Like, I need a new truck. My truck is old enough to vote. Yeah. And so I'm ready, and I'm thinking, for the first time in my life, I'm old enough to like buy a new or nearly new vehicle. And I'm honestly terrified of them a little bit because of how dependent they are on electronics and what that means for these vehicles in 10 years. Cell phone manufacturers can't even keep our cell phones up to date more than, was it 3 years in most cases? And so I worry, what happens when a touchscreen, these trucks have these giant touchscreens in the middle. What happens when that breaks? What's that going to cost me to fix? What happens if that part is no longer available? What happens when these computers can't do, what we need it to because something failed in it and I have to replace it? And yeah, that's like an old complaint, but I think it's a lot more interesting when you start thinking about the right to repair and the way that gets in. I mentioned tractors earlier. One of the biggest things right now in that industry is how farmers can't work on their own tractors because they're not allowed to have access to the tools to fix them. Yeah. And I think that's going to be a huge problem moving forward. And this idea, I love my truck. It's got 140,000 miles on it. It's a 2003. It's electronic, but it's not like overloaded with it. If a coil pack goes out, I go out, I pull the coil pack, I put a new one in. If a vacuum line breaks, I can pull the vacuum line, I can get out there, I can fix it. I can read my own engine codes, I can tell what's wrong. And I don't know how much we can do that. The shade tree mechanic is going to kind of vanish, I think, a little bit in that regard.
If it kind of is very quickly, I think. Yeah, I agree with you there. Like I have a newer Ram, and it has a lot of the electronics on it. It has a touchscreen on it. And I did an episode with my co-host Matt where we talked about reliability in cars. And actually, like you were saying, most things that break on newer cars are the touchscreen. That actually drives down the reliability rating on a lot of them. And that's so it actually, spoiler alert, it said Mazda was the most reliable, and that's because they haven't gone with touchscreens yet.
Yeah. And ironically, a Ram is what I'm looking at. Like, that's the trick I think I want. But I'm both, I love it and I hate it, because it's like, man,
I have a
if something goes wrong.
I have a 2019 Classic with the Hemi, and no complaints yet.
Yeah, that's my hope. I'm a little the thing that scares me out of it is, even more than any of the electronics, is its air ride. And I used to have a Lincoln Mark 8, which had air ride in it, and they were notoriously unreliable, and that you would get like the butt drag, like the dog butt drag with these Mark 8s, because their rear suspension would fail always. And so I'm a little gun shy of that as well as a consequence, because again, not cheap to have fixed. That was not a cheap system, because there's so many parts and everything involved. But yeah, I mean, it's always a changing world, so you got to adapt. And I guess there's a certain like serenity that comes with like going out to my garage and seeing my Triumph sitting there and being like, I know you. Right. I can listen to it and tell what's going on, which is important because TR6s also fall apart a lot. But you learn those sounds and those noises and the smells of those engines. Like, man, you run that Triumph with the top down and you can smell the gas, going through it and burning.
If it's a carbureted engine, you can smell whether you're running rich or lean or whatever, for sure.
There's something very visceral about that experience. And it's like, I love a great truck too, like quiet, easy riding, lots of features. That's cool too, but it is a very different vehicular experience.
Oh, for sure. So thanks for coming on again.
Absolutely, man.
If you want to maybe drop a little preview on your podcast, go for it. The Drunken UX Podcast.
Yeah, I don't know. You have probably 2 listeners who may overlap in that audience, but
I may only have 2 listeners. So
we talk about web development, web design, accessibility, all angles and virtues of like the web industry in that way. We have new episodes every other Monday. We're just about to ding our 100th episode, so the scary part is I literally have no clue what I'm doing for that episode yet, and it is coming up fast. But you can find us at drunkenux.com, or any podcast app you use. Just search for Drunken UX, and you will find us, no problem.
Awesome. Thanks again for coming on.
Absolutely, really, Matt.
Thanks again for listening to the Auto Riff. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, or you can email us at theautoriff@gmail.com. Without you, the listener, I'd just be a crazy person talking about cars to myself. I appreciate the support and the conversations with my listeners that this provides. Until next time, everyone drive safe and have a great week.